So we can get started. We have Stephanie here today to talk to us about production management. She's a production coordinator who has worked for Netflix, HBO Max, Apple TV, among others. And if you have any questions throughout, feel free to just put them in the chat. And then we'll also have a little bit of time at the end for a Q&A. But Stephanie, take it away. I will share my screen.
All right. Hi guys. This presentation is called I Have an Excel for That, and it's just a quick look in the little known but essential world of production management in filmmaking. So we'll just go to the next slide. So who am I? There's some familiar faces on here. Claire, I'm so sorry I saw you and I didn't say hi. So Claire Seaton is an old friend and colleague from the Media Center. So my name is Stephanie Faucher. Most people end up calling me Steph. William Mary class of 2016 with history and film and media studies. My freshman dorm was Nicholson. So hopefully we have some Nicholson people in here. I'm Surinamese Dutch American. I'm currently a production coordinator for SVODs. So those are just basically international streaming platforms. So what I've done so far is stuff for Netflix, Apple, and HBO Max, mainly documentaries. I also produce and production manage shorts. My current location is technically London. As of right now, I'm in Northern Virginia, DC, because I'm going out to a shoot in Idaho on Thursday. And I thought I could also just share how I got into the industry. So I was actually a history and econ major my freshman and sophomore year at William & Mary, but I dropped econ my sophomore year and switched to FMST. And my junior year summer, I got accepted into the Catron Scholarship. If you've been to William & Mary and done the arts, you might have received the scholarship. They basically give you a couple $1,000s to go pursue your artistic career over the summer. So I went to New York City and took 2 courses at the School of Visual Arts. I did a course in cinematography and a course in production design. And I kind of went up with no context and no plans. These classes were kind of just in the evenings and I kind of had to fill my day. So what I just started doing is I volunteered at a bunch of film festivals where I met producers and I networked and I kind of talked my way onto a feature film as my first film job as a second assistant director, which I wouldn't recommend. You should probably start as a PA, but I somehow managed to blab my way into that. And yeah, just started my career in that. So that was the summer of 2015. 2016 to 2017, I'd go up to New York, PA, and just kind of figure it out. After I graduated in 2016, I actually didn't know what I was doing. I ended up working in government consulting like every other William & Mary student until I found a grad program in the UK at the National Film and Television School in production management and kind of just went from there. And I joked that I probably could have made this somehow in an Excel format, but I'm the first to admit I'm very lazy. And Microsoft PowerPoint is so nice now. They make it so pretty for you. So I've just gone with that. So yeah, these are some of the things I've worked on, like the bigger ones. I've worked on Low Tide, which is an A24 film that came out 2 years ago now. Jaden Martell is in it and Christine Frothseth. I did the Netflix series Alien Worlds, which came out last December. How to Tell You're a Douchebag was the first film I worked on. I don't know if you can recognize on the icons on the right hand side, there's DeWanda Weiss from the new She's Gotta Have It and William Jackson Harper from A Good Place were on that film. And most recently, I production coordinated HBO Max's Persona, which was a documentary about the whole personality testing industry and how discriminatory it actually is. So what is production management? I kind of joke that I'm the mom of the production and you know, you kind of have to make sure everything happens when it's supposed to. And sometimes you have to give people tough love, which is awkward when I'm a 26-year-old telling a 46-year-old what to do. But, you know, that's kind of my job. And you're kind of across the whole show. You do prep, you do the production, and you also do post-production. And I think the only video that I found the best way to describe it is this clip from Love It or Leave It. So if you're Pod Save America fans, this is a clip, but they kind of, one of the guests is really good about telling why the Marvel movies are such a feat in production management. So Emma will get that up for you.
Three hours and 2 minutes for a fucking Avengers movie. Branagh's Hamlet was shorter, and he did every fucking soliloquy and monologue of that thing. There's an intermission in Branagh's Hamlet, and there's still a shorter runtime, I believe. Somebody fact check that, it may be longer.
Oh, I'm sorry. You don't want luxuriousness to wash over you for as long as is humanly possible? Say what you like about the writing. Say what you like about the acting. The Marvel movies are a triumph of line producing and lawyers. They got all of those people's schedules to sync up so that they could tell each other bad jokes. And as someone who lives in Los Angeles, I respect the man hours that represents. Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet was just celebrating some dead white guy. This is thousands of hours of people saying, and when is Robert available in August?
So kind of going off of that, it is just a lot of figuring out what people's schedules are and, you know, when. I think someone's mic is on. And sorry, that was just a bit distracting. You know, so I think, you know, the best way to describe production management is also just kind of like, we are just seeing when people are available, who fits in what, you know, it's just a lot of coordinating and logistics and making sure everyone is happy. And thanks, Todd, for the compliment about Alien Worlds. I really appreciate it. I'll tell some more stories about it, but I actually went out to do like the Area 51 shoot for that. So yeah, we gotta make sure everything gets into place at the right time, keeping everyone happy and staying under budget, which if it was up to us, we probably would be able to stay under budget, but editorially, that doesn't always happen. So we'll just kind of go on to the next slide so I can explain a few more things in detail. So what exactly do we do? And I said, AKA Steph story time, because I can tell you some stories, but we kind of do everything. We kind of wear a lot of hats depending on the size of the production, but mainly we're in charge of money and logistics, which is why I always say you should try to get the production team on your side. If you're a director, if you're DP, especially head up editorial, production is your greatest tool. If you get on their side, they will make things happen for you really easily, but that isn't always the case. There's kind of a running tension always between production and editorial sometimes. For editorial, sometimes doesn't like being told no, and sometimes some production people can be very strict for no reason. But the main things we really do are budgeting, scheduling, any legal. So that would be like drawing up contracts and doing the clearances for music, paintings, you name it. We do transport and hotels, make sure everyone gets fed, make sure everyone gets paid, and make sure everyone is happy. You know, I always say the best currency for the crew that you have is their goodwill. And to get their goodwill, make sure they're fed, make sure they're paid. And if you're putting them in a hotel, make sure it's actually decent. So here, like some stories of what I've done. I think some really fun ones is I was on a short film back in 2018, and we had to film with live mice in a kitchen. So I had to find a kitchen that would let us film with live mice. I went on kind of, they call it Gumtree, which is kind of like a Craigslist style website, found a place that was a abandoned restaurant kitchen. And we kind of just under, the radar filmed some live mice filming on the floor there. I've driven a Tesla to get it to and from set, which was fun. A lot of road trips. So, for this Alien World shoot, I went out to kind of keep it going. We did 11 days across 3 states. We flew from London to LA, went up to the San Simeon area, filmed there for a day, then drove across to Las Vegas. Anyone who has driven across California knows that is not a short drive. That is about 8 hours of driving. We had full kit, everything. Filmed in Area 51, then flew out to Colorado a few days later, where I ended up getting elevation sickness because I decided I needed to go on a hike away from the crew. And of course, it's ironic that the health and safety person would be the one to get sick. I'm actually going out to Idaho on Thursday to help with a pickup shoot we're doing for this Apple documentary I'm on. So I'll be there for 3 days, and then me and a PA will be driving from Coeur d'Alene, which is in the panhandle of Idaho, down to LA. So I'll be doing a COVID road trip. And speaking of COVID, I've gone out to Berlin for a shoot where we actually got pulled out last year in the middle of it because COVID was happening. Some of the things I've done as well is I've had to plan locations two locations at once, and which is really fun and difficult. So you get stuff from the editorial team with that shoot. It was like they didn't know if they wanted to shoot in Spain or they wanted to shoot in France, and it was a week out, and I had to just plan the shoot simultaneously, and then whatever they decided, that's when we action. Then I had to cancel everything else. I've had to get live bunnies for shoot. I've had to get trucks. Sorting out filming with children is always hard. If you're doing if you're thinking of making a short, don't involve children. It's expensive, it's difficult, or animals. But one of the things I always try to do with my job is I always try to spend a good amount of money on food, hotel, and try to keep the crew as happy as possible, which some people like to take advantage of. Some people will say they have a really crazy diet just so that they don't have to eat what the craftier catering is, but you kind of can't go back on it. So it's also a lot of people skills and negotiating skills and kind of learning how to talk with people, to not always tell them no, but also kind of be realistic about what can happen. It's also good to have good connections, for example, with these bunnies, for the short, I got them for free because I happen to know someone who knows someone. So if you want to be good in production management, it's always good to just kind of know random people who have random things. And, it's just always good dealing with people. A lot of times when it comes to shoots, people forget how to do basic things. You won't believe how many people have asked me to book taxis for them because they've forgotten how to book a taxi. It just happens. People's normal life goes out the window. So, just be prepared that you're going to be asked to do a lot of stupid things by people who are much older than you sometimes, or the same age as you. And you're like, but you can book your own taxi, but you just kind of have to do it. And you're kind of, like I said, you are the parent of the production. Everyone kind of looks up to you to solve their problems, but sometimes when you tell them the hard truth, they are not happy about it. And you kind of have to deal with some temper tantrums along the way. So in this next slide, I will kind of go over what the career development of someone in production management might look like, and kind of giving what the roles or kind of the responsibilities for each role. So everyone, you start off in the UK, they call them a runner. Here they call them a PA. Just kind of, you go on runs, you help do the little basic thing, get the coffees, the copying, input, receipts, and just kind of, you're just helping to run the production along. The next would be a production secretary, and you're kind of mainly booking things. So a coordinator will come for you, be like, can you book this hotel, this hotel, this hotel? You do that. You do all the expensing of receipts. You kind of just help make sure that everything is kind of running smoothly on the bottom. You'd be the person that when a crew comes back from a shoot on a documentary, you'd get the money, kind of make sure everything is there and start working through that to hand to the coordinator. So the coordinator is kind of, which is what I do right now. You're kind of coordinating everything. So you'll be told, hey, we got a shoot in Spain from March 15th to March 25th. We need a hotel room for 5 people. This is what we need. So you kind of make sure that all gets booked. You write the call sheet. You make sure the crew's taxis are booked, the cars are booked. You're kind of a very important cog in the machine. And you also help the production manager make sure you're staying within budget. The production manager will tell you how much you can spend per line. And you can then kind of make sure you're renting cars that aren't too expensive and this and that, which becomes hard when you go to places that are in the middle of nowhere and you kind of have to find stuff. A lot of creative searching sometimes to find hotels in the middle of the desert in Nevada, for example. So once you've been a production coordinator for a few years, you move up to being a production manager. And as a manager, you're kind of, you're managing budgets, you're the ones who will be negotiating the contracts a lot of the time, depending if there's a line producer or not. But you'll be managing the budget. You'll be kind of seeing the big overhead. You'll negotiate all the insurance, all the contracts, any sort of big legal documents go through you to negotiate. And if there's a lawyer, you'd work with the lawyer to kind of fine tune that. But you're the big guy for all the legal stuff. And if there's a line producer involved, they would normally make the budget. So they, for example, Netflix will come to you and be like, you have $4 million to make this documentary. The line producer, if there's one involved, will then basically figure out where all the money goes. You work back on what you already know, but it's kind of, budgets are always off, but it's, so that's kind of their big role. And they'll also do contract negotiations and stuff. The PM and LP roles they're kind of the same depending if they're there. A PM will be a line producer if there's no line producer, but that just is another level to the job. And then what you have next is a production executive. So this would actually be a staff role in a company, in a production company. And what they would do is they'd be overseeing about 2 to 3 projects. They'd work with a PM and help them, and they kind of negotiate the budgets with the commissioners. So a production executive would be the one talking with Apple or Netflix or HBO Max and saying, we have this show. They'll pitch the show, and then they will be like, we need 10 million for this. And they then will help the PM or the line producer with the budget. And they're kind of the person that, like, if you have a big question, you kind of go to them and they will help you out. And then lastly, you have what is the head of production. So these are this is senior level. You've been doing this for 15, 20 years. This is normally with big companies, like, so you have a head of production in Netflix, a head of production in Amazon, and they are like the big company levels. They're the ones who help come up with like the 10 shows, tell them it's sustainable, tell them how much they think it's going to be. And they run about 10 to 15 projects. They know what they're doing, and they've been doing it for years and years and years. So that's kind of where it all goes. Right now, for example, with my job as a coordinator, I do a lot of COVID coordination. COVID has made things exceptionally much more difficult with filming. Everyone's got to get tested. It means, for example, booking more cars because some people don't want to share cars. A lot of health and safety things get increased. I can't say too much, but like with Apple require a lot of information for COVID parameters. So it's a lot of researching and a lot of extra work that has to be done to make sure shoots can happen. So that's kind of the basic of these roles. Does anyone have any specific questions about like roles or getting in or like anything like that? And then we can move on to the next slide. So obviously I called this, I have an Excel for that. So I thought I would try to show us a couple of Excels. Unfortunately, I can't show any of my finance ones because they're for the Apple show and that's all confidential information. But I thought I would show you some Excels that you might not know were things that from before. So what we have on top is a third-party promo release log. And what that essentially is, when you have a show and you have archive or stock footage or anything like that, you have to basically show what it is, show that it's licensed, what it is, and then how long it's in the show for. So we have a massive Excel for that. Some shows have none. The HBO Max show I did had one that was about 900 lines. So it can get really big and intense and your eyes will start watering because you're looking at the same Excel for 4 hours. But that's an example of an Excel that we have for post-production, where especially in post-production, you kind of are going through the show and you're making sure everything is accounted for, everything is licensed, everything has a release. So we have a bunch of Excels for that. On the bottom right, we have what I made for a shoot we did back in December, which was a COVID isolation quarantine travel plan. So what we have is the dates, what it is, and any notes that we would have for that. So we had one where isolation was included. Our team didn't have to isolate, what our US crew would do, and then an emergency flyout for me if I had to fly out from the States. So it's kind of what a lot of times in Excels, we'll have several plans laid out so that we can kind of look back and see how everything's dated and just kind of make sure that when we action it, we know exactly what we need to do and when. And then obviously, goes without saying, we got a lot of finance Excels. I currently, for this shoot, I have about 5 finance Excels going. So this one I've made for our shoot, for the pickup shoot that we're having right now. It's a petty cash log where as the shoot goes in, I'll be putting in what we spend, why, and it's a running cost log that my production manager can see. And as the shoot goes on, she can update her cost manager as it's going. But obviously we'll have a budget, we'll have, you know, credit card logs, we'll have expense logs, we'll have a budget log, you name it. It's just anything can put in an Excel, hotel comparison, car comparisons. It's just, you know, it's just easy for us to keep track, and it makes it really easy if you need to change anything, you just put it in Excel, and if a formula is there, it'll change for you. So I think these are 2 really fun questions. You can put your answers in the chat. But I think as a production person, it's really interesting to see what people think and what is, in my opinion, the actual case. So I had some questions. So what do you think what do you think is, I forgot the R, there's a typo there. What do you think are the most overlooked costs in filmmaking? And what do you think tends to be the most expensive things paid for in production? So you can put your answers in the chat and I'll give you guys some time to think and then I'll answer the question. We'll give everyone like 2 more minutes, just if you want to write a longer answer. All right. So I think all those answers are good. But I will say the people who said licensing, it is one of the more overlooked costs, I would say, in documentary and fiction, as well as insurance. A lot of people, especially when you're doing smaller independent films, will budget and forget that if you have an expensive camera or you're doing expensive things, insurance is expensive. But yeah, you know, time is important, the value, you know, filmmakers, all of that crew is super important. And then I would say clearances actually tend to be the most expensive thing. What ends up in a documentary, as in a fiction, someone will be like, oh, you know, I just want to play this Billie Holiday song, and that's going to end up costing them $10,000 to clear. Especially when you go, places like Netflix and Apple have a big budget for this, because what they want for clearances is what they call all rights in perpetuity, which means they own the rights for the music for the rest of time. So they'll pay a lot of money for that. But a lot of times with independent films or smaller films, they'll want to put on these big songs, and that ends up costing so much money. And Chris, actually food, if you're a good production person, is not overlooked at all. For me, food is one of the most important things, having been a PA on food sets with really bad food. Food, I think, is really important, and giving, you know, depending on the shoot style, when we send crews out, we just give them a per diem, but giving them enough money to get good food, and understanding that crew will go to whatever nearest. They don't think what's cheapest. You yeah, I think, but you know, food is really important. All this stuff is important, but you know, if you are ever making a short film or an independent documentary, make sure to give yourself enough money for any sort of licenses for music, artwork, whatever that you might use, and insurance. And then, you know, someone wrote delays, definitely have like a contingency line in your budget as well, which normally is 10 to 15% of the overall budget. But delays do cost a lot of money, or pickup shoots as well. So for the next slide, I have a little exercise where I thought I would kind of walk you guys through kind of how I break down a scene. This can be done for a documentary and fiction, but I thought fiction would be easier. You know, so what I would say is if we can, I'm wondering if maybe, should we put the mics on for this? If someone wants to come up, we need a bit of a scene. If someone wants to give me a scene, just think of, I need characters, the location, props, action, and what time of day. And then I'll kind of break down the scene and what questions I would ask to kind of budget a scene out. So why, I guess I'm trying to think what's best. Yeah, why don't we keep it in the chat before? So yeah, why don't people put some suggestions for a scene in the chat? I'll give you guys a couple minutes, and I'll pick what I think will be the most educational from there. All right, I think I might actually go with the kind of absurd 3 characters in the Everglades eating hamburgers, because I think that has the most room for discussion. So the first would be all the logistics of getting to the Everglades. Are we filming are they on a boat? Are they in the water in the Everglades? Are they on land? How are we going to get the crew out there? Do we have to take the crew out by boat? Can we drive to the location? Are we doing a full crew? What kind of cameras are we using? If anything involving drones, actually, I forgot to say one of the most overlooked costs as well is drone costs, because flying drones is very expensive. So that, you know, in terms of location, do we need a drone? What kind of camera equipment are we using? Are we using more than one camera? And stuff like that. In terms of sound, you know, is it under a flight path? Is there a lot of natural sound that we would pick up? What kind of sound setup would we have? Can you do one sound person, or do we need a full team to make sure we can get an isolated sound for the dialogue? And then following on to characters, are all these characters adults? That's fine. If there are any kids or anyone under 18, that severely limits our hours in what we can film. I think most kids, I think if you're a teenager, I think it's 8 to 10 hours a day, and anything from that becomes shorter time on set where they have to break properly. So kind of finding out what kind of characters, are they male, are they female, are they going to be local, do they have any sort of allergies or kind of things we have to be aware of? Going to the Everglades, there's a lot of, you know, nature. So will they get an anaphylactic shock if they get stung by a mosquito or a bee or anything as well? And that's also something we have to look into the location. How safe is it? What do we need a special kind of animal wrangler there, or someone, a guy, a medic or a guide to help us through this location? And then with the characters as well, like what are they wearing? Wardrobe, do they need replacements? Are they going to get wet? How many, are they doing anything besides eating the hamburgers? Is someone going to fall over? Are they, someone going to spill something on the clothing? How many repeats do we need? This and that. In terms of the hamburgers as well, that'll be how many times do we film the shot? How many hamburgers do we need to have? How are we going to keep them warm so that they're kind of edible for the crew so that they don't get food poisoning? how quickly can we get them to a hospital if they have food poisoning, stuff like that. And then, so if it's the time of day, are we doing this when it's supposed to be sunny? How hot is it going to get at the hottest part of the day? How many hours of daylight do we have? How long is the camera crew and the sound crew and everyone going to need to set up this location so that we can film? And how does it impact our filming hours? Does that mean we have to film for 1 or 2 days? Do we, how big of a crew can we send? Do we set up and then send some of the crew back to a base point so that it's a small minimal crew there? These are all questions that I would ask before we start budgeting, because as you start breaking it down, it might be like this one scene where 3 characters eat in the Everglades might end up being a 3-day shoot because it's too hot during the midday to film, which is going to cause sweat, which is going to cause continuity issues for filming. Or there's, at 5 p.m., these bugs come out and make a lot of noise. So we have to finish filming by 5 p.m. every day. We're filming on a sandbank where the water comes in at 3. So we have to stop filming at 3. So all these things are things you have to think about so that you can go back to editorial and kind of be honest with them about, okay, so this one scene where you want these 3 people eating on the Everglades is going to cost, you'd say like 20 grand to film for 3 days. Is there something we can do to cheapen it? Can we film it in a studio? Is there an area that looks like the Everglades that is safer and easier to get to? How much, how important is the scene, and kind of understanding. I think as a production person, I always try to understand how important a scene or something is to the production. So, I always tell directors that I work with when I produce or production manage short films, I say, make a wish list of what you want. On the top, put the things you need to have in the film. Then you put stuff that you would like to have. That would be great. What enhance the film. And then the bottom is kind of like things you want to have, but you can't afford, but then we can always strive for it. So it's kind of always thinking about the practical, but then also understanding why this scene is important to the overall project. So you kind of have to meld those two together. And, needless to say, with the scene breakdown, it'd also be how many cars are we hiring? Do we have to bring with catering, for example, would we need to make sure that the catering is mobile, or do we kind of give people packed lunches? Would that mean we have to get the caterer in the morning at a base point? So from the small scene of 3 people eating hamburgers in the Everglades, it could turn into, you have a base camp, you go to location, all the cars go to the base camp, then you take a boat from that location to where we're filming in the Everglades. How do you make sure everyone's got the food, sunblock, cooling, and stuff like that? Most of the time you'll have an EpiPen and a first aid kit anyways, but it's just kind of realizing that a small scene ends up expanding much further once you start looking, and that all has costs. But yeah, that's kind of how I think it ends up getting a bit webby, but then it's all interconnected anyways. It's about 7 past. So I think I think that's kind of it. Oh no, I think I have my top tips next. Sorry. Yeah, so here are my top tips. It's kind of counterintuitive, but I always say always over budget when you start budgeting anyways. It's easier to take away costs than it is to add costs. So if for example, that you are flying out crew to LA, de facto put I'm doing it in pounds because we're just doing it in pounds because I'm in the UK, 150 pounds a night for a hotel. Because then if you find a hotel that's cheaper, you have more money to put elsewhere instead of budgeting for 100 pounds a night and all of a sudden your hotels are much more expensive. When making a film, be realistic about your limitations, which a lot of directors sometimes don't realize. I have a friend who worked for a company where the director wanted to film himself out of a helicopter and didn't understand why insurance wouldn't allow that. So it's, especially in the production, you have to be realistic, and it's about explaining that realism to other people in the team, but also being open that you could be wrong. So never, unless it's a hard, fast no, say you'll look into it and then let the documents and the other information you're told speak for itself. Crew want to be paid, fed, and looked after. Never cut corners on these costs. As I said, I've been on sets where they've just been give them bad food. Don't do that. Spend the extra $10 a person on good food and it'll go a much longer way. get, make sure they're paid on time, but that's sometimes on a bigger company, that's not, you okay it, the accounting department takes care of it, but make sure to give their expenses back at a good pace and this and that. And they want to just be looked after. Spend the extra like $30 on a good hotel, or even $10. It goes a long way, because then they can sleep well. Crew, especially if you do documentaries, crews are tired. They work 12, 15-hour days easily. So putting them in a crap hotel isn't great, and making sure that, like, if they're on long flights and stuff, just get them a taxi. The $50 is going to go so much more and get you so much further in goodwill than saving the $50 in a £1 million budget would. Never forget insurance. Treat everyone with respect. Every department is important. We're all making one project. Production kind of gets forgotten about a lot of the time, but I think it's important in production to understand how every department works together. And like I said, when I was breaking down the scene, I thought about filming daylight hours, but also sound, because they all work together. If you're doing anything with VFX, it's so important to talk to the VFX team beforehand so that they can tell you if they need plates, if they need shots specifically filmed for the special effects that you need. But it's so important to treat everyone with respect, because, we're all, at the end of the day, we're all trying to make a director's or producer's vision, and it's in everyone's job to do that. And I think I've seen a lot of people from every department forget that sometimes. And so I think it's so important to just remember that it's everyone's a cog in the machine. No one, yeah, you can say without the director, there wouldn't be the film, but then, without production, people wouldn't get from the hotel to set, but then without sound, you have nothing, you have no sound for the film. And so it's just so important to remember everyone's role. And why I also think that if you want to start out in the film industry, no matter where you want to go as a director, producer, sound guy, whatever, be a runner or PA, sorry, be a PA, get your boots on the ground and just kind of listen to every department. That's something I did when I was a PA. I really would listen to the complaints of every department, So sound would complain that they weren't told in advance that, there'd be, we're in a place where there's a lot of crickets, which is really important. So kind of learning these things so that when you go further on, if you're going to be a director or a DP or whatever, understanding that this location, how it impacts the other, and that what you get is a more cohesive, productive shoot. And last but not least, if you think it's going to cost money, it probably will, unless you know someone or whatever. Most people have now gotten on to filmmakers. Permits have gone through the roof, except places like New York and stuff. But smaller towns have gone on that people want to film there, so they're like, oh, a film crew, let's charge them like $500. But sometimes you can get away with it if you're a small enough crew. But that's also one of the things to keep in mind is that, most of the time, if you think it's going to cost you some money, it probably will. And if you can find a free option, then that's great, but kind of always anticipate that you'll have to drop some money on it. So feel free to email me or add me on LinkedIn if you have any questions. If you don't get a chance to ask them now, I'm totally open to helping people out within the industry. I got a lot of help when I started in the industry, so I always like extending a helping hand. And I'm open to any and all questions. And if I can answer it, I'll try and field it to someone else in the industry that can, within the US or UK or anything like that. So I'll let people turn on their mics. I think that if they feel more comfortable having a little bit of a conversation, if they want to ask any questions or any comments or anything like that.
Yeah, feel free to send it in the chat or unmute and just ask away.
So what is the most ridiculous location request that you've gotten, Steph?
I think we lost her. She looks frozen.
Can give her a second and see if she reconnects.
I'm sorry, my internet died. But yes, feel free to, if anyone has any questions, apologies about that. You may ask away.
I actually asked right before you got cut off. What is the most ridiculous location request that you've gotten?
Like on location?
Or like sort of the strangest request, yeah, for a place to shoot that was most challenging to handle?
I think the restaurant kitchen was interesting because it was definitely like a sketch thing. They like texted me and they were like, "Are you shooting a porno in here?" And I was like, "No, we just need to film a restaurant scene." God, I'm trying to think other weird. Yeah, when I was in grad school, it was like, you know, beach houses or cars. I think filming in cars is always a lot more difficult than people expect. It's a lot more dangerous. I think, yeah, I think filming in Area 51 was weird. That one was hard because we went out and like there's nothing. I don't know if you've ever gone out to that part of Nevada. There's nothing. I don't recommend it for a holiday either. It's like 3 hours out of Vegas and there's just nothing. God, I'm trying to think weird location requests. Yeah, I think the mice in the kitchen was like the most ridiculous one because we basically had to film with live mice in the kitchen, which you know, that's a lot of health and safety codes that weren't great, but we just kind of did it, slid it under the radar, and the guys didn't find out. So, you know, we're good. There's a lot of that sometimes you turn your head the other way with those little things. Okay. Any other questions?
Chloe has her hand raised.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chloe.
Hi, I was wondering if you had any tips for finding PA jobs, and then like what was something that you think was valuable when you had that job? Like I know you mentioned learning from the other departments, but do you have anything else that you were like, yeah, this is like why I chose this job?
So with PA jobs, I think it's funny because as someone who graduated from William & Mary, I think last year reached out to me about this, and I was like, a lot of stuff is still on Facebook. So I tell people, if you want to be in the film industry, you still have to be on Facebook or have kind of a working Facebook page that you check out. Gail has given a really good suggestion of the VA Production Alliance. I would say go on Google, just see what's around Facebook. There's so many pages per state, per city. In terms of what was most valuable about PA jobs, I kind of what I liked about being in a PA was like working with everyone, and that's kind of I think what made me realize I wanted to work in production is that I loved working with the full gambit of the production or the project. So, you know, you work with everyone and you see how the whole thing, and you're one of the few people that like, besides maybe the producer, not even the director, but maybe the producer, you're with the project for like the majority of the time, like maybe at least 70 to 80% of the time. So I just really enjoyed, I'm an extrovert, so I like talking to people and meeting new people and like interacting with people. So I think this role fits with my personality really well. But I think it was just kind of the thing where I'd be on sets, I'd meet the production team and they'd talk about what they do, which was like all the logistics and the finance. And I was like, this sounds really cool. This really works with my brain and how it works. And I kind of just pursued it from there. And I kind of, being a PA, I was able to do a bit with the sound department, with G&E or grip department. And, you know, just seeing that and like the art department, wardrobe, and I kind of got a taste of what they do. And so I found out that I just really like production. So that's why being a PA is really good, because you could go in being like, originally I really wanted to be like a cinematographer or work in the camera department. And then I kind of found out I really like this. So I would say definitely be a PA, because then you can kind of see how they all work. And then you might find out, oh, I actually really love the sound department. The sound department's cool. That's where I want to go. Yeah. Do work. Yeah, I think Steve just wrote a really good point with the local no budget projects. Yeah, I think definitely, you know, just trying. I mean, the sound department is the best. I love all my soundies. But you know, I think, yeah, trying to do some short films, try and do your own short films. That's something I did as well. I did an independent study at William & Mary where we did a short film. So, you know, it's always good to do that. And also I think where I realized I really like production is because of my first role as a second AD, which is kind of the production side assistant directing program where you do the call sheets and the scheduling. I kind of got a taste for it and I realized I really enjoyed that. And then do I have any resources for the rules of thumb metrics budgeting? So this is a bit difficult because every place is different. So I think, you know, for me, because I'm moving up in my career, I'm seeing budgets that my bosses are making. But I would say I always over budget, you know, so if you get given 5,000, let's say you're doing a short film, you get given $20,000. My first budget is always about $30,000 and then I bring it down. I do some research, I talk to people, I always kind of see what there is. And, you know, as you get more detailed and scaled down and get more into the nitty gritty of the script or the idea of the documentary, things will scale down and things will even out. But I would always say over budget with your first budget, make sure you give yourself enough buffer and then start like researching into how much is insurance going to cost? You know, if you can find out what the camera kit is, are you paying for the camera? It's all these questions. But then as you go further, these things will start becoming intuitive, and you'll just kind of go from there. Yeah, I can give, if you want to just email me, I have like a budget template that I use for personal projects that I can send you that I really like, that is super easy to edit and stuff. So yeah, I guess there's a lot of soundies in here.
Steph, thanks so much for giving this presentation. It's awesome. And I'm so glad to be able to speak face to face finally. So yeah. I had a question. Where, I mean, obviously you love the production process and you love just being sort of spread out across all the departments. And I think that's really cool. But for yourself, you laid out a whole career path in production. Where do you see yourself going? Or are you just kind of open to the process? And yeah.
I mean, I am open to the process. I think, you know, I would love to be like head of production for like documentary at Netflix. I think that'd be so cool. Or like a head of production at an SVOD. I think it's such a cool, with streaming documentaries. That's the thing with documentaries, for example. Streamers now realize they're really cheap for them to make and they have great output and they get a lot of great feedback. You know, think about Tiger King or Don't F with Kittens and stuff. Those are relatively cheap for them to make. So those departments are going to be expanding. Yeah, that's my current career path, but who knows, maybe I'll make a short film and end up becoming a good big director. Who knows? And that's kind of the beauty about this industry as well. You kind of don't have to fully stay on your path. You can decide like, well, actually, you know what? I'm like, you know, I know someone who was a sound designer who's now become a big composer. You know, it's kind of, you can move across, but, you know, currently I'm going to follow the career path, but who knows, you know, as I'm producing these short films, that might go another way. But yeah, I think I'm just kind of following what happens. I'm staying in London right now because that's the hub for documentaries, but who knows, I might come back here, might go to Europe because Brexit is that little thing that happened. So filming in with the UK is kind of a weird thing now, because before UK crews didn't need visas. Now they need visas, which ends up costing a lot of money. So that's gonna be really interesting to see how that goes in the next couple of years. Claire asked a question. So what, production is super female oriented. Production is one of the few places where it's mainly women, and it's really interesting. It's a lot of women are in the production department, which, you know, then stereotypically men are like the DPs and this and that. But the industry's kind of changed, you know, more women are becoming DPs and sound guys or sound women, I should say, sound people. So, but yeah, it's actually one of the few, it's like a very female dominated part of the industry. But obviously a lot of people don't really know about it. So it's not really talked about as much as like wardrobe or makeup or all these other, you know, parts of the industry that are normally known to be female dominated. We need more men. Like, hey, if any guys want to be production people, you know, it's great. Oh yeah. Doesn't it actually, so I'll kind of feed off into Troy's question as well. Thank you, Troy, for that comment. So it's like female dominated. In the UK, what you have a lot with that, because of like how it's set up, you have a lot of women who are mothers, job sharing. So you have one mother working a job 2 days a week and another 3 days a week. In the UK, they've become a lot more flexible about moms working. So a lot of production women actually might work 2 days a week, someone else taking over 3 days a week. Actually, with documentary, it's almost like a bell curve with terms of times. So sometimes, in prep and in post, it's 9 to 5, you're just kind of calling people, blah, blah, blah. There's not much to do. So you just kind of work normal days, normal hours. And kind of like with any shoot, once you get up to the production, a couple weeks, longer days, longer hours, might work some weekends. It's different when you do like a fiction. So if you do a show, like let's say The Crown or The Witcher or any of these big shows that do film in the UK, as a production person, you're basically not home for like 7 months. You're on location filming wherever for 7 months, doing the full production thing. So it's kind of, it depends what sector you're in. And if like, for example, with commercials, you work a 1 week stint, couple 10-hour days, and then you're paid for the month. So documentaries is a bit more actually of a 9 to 5 job where, because the contracts tend to be like 9 to 10 months. So you have times where it is really slow and you just work 9 to 5. Other times where you're working 14-hour days, 7 days a week because you're trying to get a shoot off the ground because it always bottlenecks. It does take heroic levels of stamina and a lot of tolerance for personalities. Like I said, you get told, I've been asked if I understand how like renting a car works because the director didn't get the car he wanted, even though we told him you get it in a class and you'll get the car you get. And people, like I said, people kind of forget how to be a normal human sometimes when it comes to production. It's kind of amazing the stuff you get asked for. And people just get, people forget there can be a plan A, B, and C. It's really funny. My current boyfriend is a cam op and kind of matriculates into real life when things kind of go a bit awry. He starts going, this is it, we're done. I can't do this anymore. And I'm like, okay, well, there's like, we have plan B, C, D. It's like, fine, we'll find another way of working that out. So it's really funny that like, I think as a production person, you're always thinking about the next 5 steps or like, okay, if plan A doesn't work, we have these 5 other plans. And tips for work-life balance, man, it is hard, but I think I've learned to just kind of tell people, hey, I'm signing off at 7. There's sometimes, and it's hard because I know I felt this pressure a lot, but it's like, it's okay to not respond to that email. If it's 7 o'clock at night, you're not going to get an answer till tomorrow morning anyways. Send that email tomorrow morning. And like for us, sometimes when we film in California, I'll start my day at noon in London just so that I work a little later that night, but I'm still getting like sleep and stuff. And, and also as you get higher up in your career, it is easier to kind of be like, nah, I'm not going to respond to this. But I think the industry is starting to get better about that. I think more people are talking about mental health within the industry, and it's not just a suck it up, just like work the 14 hours. It's also about paying people overtime and, making sure, because, people need rest. A lot of accidents happen because people don't get rest. And I've been on one of the shoots I was on, we had a props guy who had to return, like we had to bring back like 5 picture cars from a location, but it was just him going back and forth an hour each way. And it wasn't our first split shift shoot, which is you start at 3 p.m. and you end at 3 p.m. We ended up going to about 7 a.m. And this guy was so exhausted, he like swerved off the highway and almost like killed himself, and I think a lot of people are starting to talk about like, that's not safe. We need to make sure there are good health and safety parameters in place because also I know I'm not as effective. So yeah. So, I think it's just also like as a PA, if you're starting out, it is fine. One of the things I would say to PAs is if a production is asking you to spend your own money, you can totally say no. Like I'd rather have float or, because as you're starting out, your pay isn't as good. Production shouldn't be leaning on you to buy stuff because that ends up becoming a big, mental strain on you. And I think a lot of PAs get worried that if they say no, like no, I'm not gonna pay for this. They're gonna, the production's gonna be wrong. Just tell your PM like, I'm sorry, I can't expense this. Is there a way the production can give me a card or something? And if you're feeling ill, if you're feeling tired, I'm urging people, because I didn't do this as much, but just be more upfront about it. Be like, I feel sick. I don't feel safe to drive. It's a safety concern. If you've been driving, one shoot I was on, I drove like 8 hours straight, and I was like, I can't drive anymore. Like, this is unsafe. Just kind of make sure to set those in place. Most productions will actually be fine with it, but I think we're kind of told to not, because, oh, everything's going to fall apart, but it won't. Take that hour break, because that hour break will take you so much further. And most production and a good production manager will agree and be like, yeah, fine, just take that hour break. It's okay. So yeah, anything else? I can stay online for a little bit if someone wants to like ask me a one-on-one question before they sign off. But yeah, whatever. Oh, so this is interesting. Percentage of the shoots are union. So in the UK, there really are no unions. People aren't unionized. So you don't have union rates and non-union rates. People just kind of work. When we come to if we hire for documentaries, for example, when we hire US crew, we tend to just pay their union rate. So that's it's hard, because in the UK, it's not as unionized as it would be here. But we normally will be like, to DP, what's your rate? And then negotiate from there. But we tend to try and pay union rates if possible. But yeah. But like I said, you can add me on LinkedIn. You can totally just kind of send me an email if you need. But yeah. Feel free to reach out to me, and don't be a stranger. If you want to William and Mary, all are welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, like I said, I have a few more minutes. So if anyone wants to stay on and ask me a question like one-on-one or with less people, I have like about 5 or 10 minutes. So feel free. It's totally fine.